And we are live. Thanks for dropping in, guys. I've been using Caltopo for probably 6 or 7 years now, and it just keeps getting better and better. When I first started using it, I was using All Trails with a paid subscription, and Caltopo features didn't seem that great, but over time they just got better and better. And as I said before, everything you really need to do, you can do on the free account. You don't have to pay for anything. I think a lot of why Caltopo is such an interesting tool for us is where it came from. It's not a mapping program for hikers. At least that's not the way it started. It is a tool that was created by a guy that was in search and rescue in California as a way of integrating various data and tools that were beneficial to their search and rescue missions. And they have a lot of information that is also good for us as SOTA activators that you just don't find on recreational hiking websites. There also is, it goes beyond just simply mapping. There's actually some analysis tools which are good for not only SOTA, but hams in general. And so we're going to focus on the SOTA stuff, but we'll mention some of the other stuff as we go along. And like so many things on the internet, it was kind of a one-man endeavor for several years that was kind of done as a hobby, and then it grew into a full-time job for Matt Jacobs. And now it's a small company with a number of employees that are actively developing features. There's a mobile app. I use it more than in fact, I never even take my GPS unit anymore because I do my mapping on the computer at home, and then I can easily pull up my maps on the app in my phone, and it's just easier. It's very seamless. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So the main differences between the different subscription levels are all things that don't pertain to actually drawing maps. They change in the number of non-public maps that you can save, which I don't care. All my maps that I create are public. I don't care if anybody looks at them. Now, if you are trying to route out a first activation of a summit, you might want to make that private so that nobody finds it. But I really don't think anybody, and the way they're stored, they're not super easy to find. So I think that's kind of a non-issue. You can create larger PDFs in terms of size, as well as print jobs. Once again, I don't know that that applies to route planning. I don't use paper maps. Some people probably do, but that's a non-issue to me as well. The big
Pat,
thing. Yep, go ahead, Paula.
Yeah, just a quick question. When they say larger PDFs, are they talking about larger when it's printed out, or are they talking about, and I know I'm kind of jumping the gun here, but you know, when you get that little red tinted square to expand out,
Correct.
is it larger that way?
Correct. That's what it is. And so we won't talk about printing so much tonight, but when we do look at that, Yes, that basically means, and it's funny that they say larger PDFs. You know, here they say 8.5 by 11. I think here you can print up to an 11 by 17, and I don't know that there's a limit on a pro size. But yes, it has to do with the physical dimensions of your printouts, and um, to me, I don't really see that as an issue. And once again, the idea is to be able to use the tool to plan your activations. Now, the big thing for me now that I'm using the app, and I've really only been using the app pretty much this year, um, is no offline map downloads on the free account. So in order for you to have a background map displayed, you have to have a cellular data connection. So that's not a bad thing to bump up to the basic account to get that feature if you're using the app. Now, it's kind of funny. I used it for a number of years with a free account, and I started paying for the basic account, not because I wanted any of these features, but because I felt guilty that I've been using this tool for a number of years and not contributing to it, because it is an amazing resource. So I think it is worthwhile at least throwing them a few dollars. I do have a pro account now, which we'll discuss a few of those benefits later on, but that that's way over and above what most people need. So without further ado, we will start looking at Caltopo. Some people say, it's funny, I say topographical maps, but Caltopo sounds right to me. So Caltopo, Caltopo, whatever you want to call it. We are basically going to be looking at the real simple features that you need to start using and drawing a route tonight. And so we don't even need to be signed in. One of the benefits of signing in, and you can sign in with any of these affiliate logins, is you can save maps. That is obviously a good thing. But for right now, we're not even going to fiddle with that. I can minimize that left sidebar. And for now, we'll minimize the right sidebar to give us more screen real estate. And you'll notice up here is a little cursor information box that will tell you the lat long UTM coordinates and the elevation of wherever you're looking at. Nothing fancy. Google Maps does that. A lot of things do that. You can go to the config menu and change those options, but that seems like a pretty realistic default set of options. So the main thing we'll look at tonight is in the add menu where you add features to your maps. And tonight, really all we're going to talk about are, markers and lines, which is the meat of what we'll be doing. Most of the menu options you can also get to by right-clicking. And sometimes right-clicking is a better option than going to the menu. And I'll bring those up when we get to them. Now, one of, I think, the really killer features of Caltopo are its map layers. It has a lot of different map layers that you have at your disposal. And if you've worked with maps for any length of time, there is no such thing as a perfect map. And you need access to lots of different map sources to get the best picture of the lay of the land. Maps can be out of date, not have the type of information you're looking for. Sometimes they're just hard to read. Sometimes they're just plain wrong. And so these are some of the map layers that I think are the most important for planning a SOTA activation. The map builder, topo, and hybrid layers are Caltopo's kind of signature layers. They have a lot of recreation information like trails and parking. They have terrain shading, topo lines, and it scales pretty well for zooming in and out, meaning features will disappear as you scale, zoom out, so that you can still read the map reasonably well. The hybrid adds a little imagery to it. I don't use this, but it is there. Scan topos are the good old U.S. Geological Survey 7.5-minute 1 to 20,000 quads that everybody knows and loves. They've been around forever, and they cover the entire United States. And Caltopo actually also has the Canadian equivalent of that. So all of Canada is covered as well. They are, have a lot of detail, but unfortunately, the USGS quads have not been updated in quite a long time. And so most of the information can be out of date. And it also does not zoom well. It kind of looks like a patchwork quilt once you get out a little ways. But once again, a lot of the stuff that we look for as SOTA activators may not necessarily be on the latest and greatest maps. We often use old roads that are no longer in service by anyone else to get to SOTA summits. So it has some value. Now, what I prefer for general use are the forest topo maps. They are much more up to date than the USGS ones. And you have a couple options. You can get rid of the vegetation overlay, which makes it a little bit cleaner. And you can also go back to a 2013 map, just another option. And once again, options are a good thing. The bad thing is they only cover areas that the U.S. Forest Service cares about. If there's not U.S. Forest Service property, there are no maps. So they are limited in that way. The TF Outdoors is a pretty good layer. It has the terrain shading. It has lots of good recreation information. You can even see things like campsites on there. It will have trail names. I use it sometimes. It's a little less cluttered looking than some maps. And once again, it's just another source. Obviously, sometimes it's good to have aerial imagery. And this is pretty good stuff. It's pretty up to date. It's not as high a resolution as the Google satellite images, but the Google satellite layers are not available in a free account. It costs money to use the Google layers, and so you don't get that in a basic account. But they do give you 2 different years or ranges of years, which is good because the lighting sources are probably different between those years. And so that can help reveal different features just because the lighting is coming from a different angle. So that can sometimes reveal features that are not otherwise easily seen. This is the National Agricultural something, blah, blah, blah. So it's only US, which is what most of us are concerned with. It's not the super high resolution, neither is the global imagery, but it also is global coverage. So if you're planning a trip out of the country, that one can be of use sometimes. So Map Builder Roads is, once again, part of their signature thing, series of maps. It's got a lot of the information stripped out. It's not really pertinent to SOTA planning. The OpenStreetMap and CycleMap, if you're not familiar with them, those are open source mapping projects that you can contribute data to. A lot of the stuff, the features in the map builder layers come from OpenStreetMaps. Their trails tend to be pretty up to date, but they don't have necessarily obscure hiking trails on them. So once again, no map is the greatest. The shaded relief is nice, not so much that we'll show you a trick in one of the next sessions, but this is good for adding well, let's go ahead and take a step back. That shows you kind of a shaded relief with no other features. It's intended more as an overlay that you use with other map layers, which we'll get to very shortly. So I'm going to skip over the enhanced, and that's pretty much all the map layers that I use. Now, there are some cool things here you can look at. There's the FAA maps, which will show you where like the vortex are and the frequency and their abbreviations. What I kind of like looking at sometimes, they have these historic maps, which this information, it's funny to look at these and then switch back to a modern topo map and things look totally different. Obviously, the surveying was not as good back then, but sometimes you can find some pretty cool stuff. Just looking at our recent trip in the Smokies, Saturday and Monday for me, I could find the old railroad grade that we crossed hiking up to the shelter. So those are the map layers that I tend to make use of. Now, one of the really cool features of Caltopo is it gives you the ability to stack layers. And I don't know of any other mapping application that gives you quite this ability. And as far as I know, you can keep stacking layers as much as you want. And so, like, I can put the old USGS quads in there, and then I can say, well, I want to see the 16 Forest Service quads. And you have the ability to change the transparency. And so you can view kind of a combination of maps, and it makes it very easy to compare features. Let's go someplace. And it always amazes me that you can just type in something and it will take you right there. Of course, if you type in Rich Mountain, it will not know which Rich Mountain you want to go to. So you can see here that there's not a whole lot of variation between those two maps. Things are a little bit easier to see on the Forest Service map, but I can add the shaded relief and I can bump that up to about 25%. And that will give your maps that kind of nice fake 3D look, which kind of makes it easier to visualize the lay of the land. But if I crank that one up to 100%, it wipes out everything underneath it. And the way the layers work is it's kind of backwards. The layer on the bottom will kind of block out the layers above it. So even though this one's at 100%, if I move this one up to 100, that's what you're going to see is that layer. The enhanced uses a technique called multiplying, which adds the same kind of feature, but it never completely blocks out. It just kind of makes things a little bit darker. So you can bump that all the way up to get the most 3D effect, yet still be able to see the underlying map. So this only works really when it's the layer on the bottom. So I can go and add the global imagery layer and then put back, we'll just go with the normal shaded relief. And even on that, it will make your imagery into a 3D image. Once again, it's really nice, especially once we start drawing lines, to be able to see visually the lay of the land. Let me check my notes here. So have I lost anybody yet?
We're still with you.
Okay. So
Pat, I have a quick question.
sure, go right ahead.
I know pilots have to upgrade their FAA maps routinely. Do you know, do they upgrade those or regularly, or are they kind of old or what?
I would assume that they are probably fairly recent. They may not be as up to date as what the pilots are using, but I'm sure as they are available, I guess it depends on how much work is involved. If it's in a digital format, it probably is pretty easy for them to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I've heard of people using the marine layer maps, but obviously that really doesn't apply to SOTA.
Hey, Pat, this map layer look that we're seeing on the right side of the screen, is that default on the Caltopo or something we have to click on to bring up?
As far as the options that I have here, or, I mean, it's always part of Caltopo. And so normally you start out with just one layer and you pick and choose which layer you want to start with. And then you can add additional layers as you see fit. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Pat?
Yep.
Are you going to talk about that weather feature that's on there?
Not today.
Okay.
We will go into some of this stuff later, but I want to kind of save pretty much everything from here down for tomorrow or next week's session.
Okay, good.
because I want to get at least the basics down today. So yeah,
Okay.
we'll look at a lot of this stuff. Some of it doesn't make sense for us, but a lot of it does in ways that you would not have thought. So once again, there's lots and lots of good information here.
Okay.
So one thing that's nice is, I think we're ready to move on. So now we'll look at adding stuff to our map. And the easiest thing we can do is to add a marker. If we use the menu option, it's going to stick the marker right in the center of the screen. You can always move it wherever you want it to be, but this is one of those things where it's easier if you right click on the map. Well, that was actually in the center, so let's go somewhere else. So I'm going to say, I'm going to put a marker there, and it will put it right where I want it. And so pretty simple stuff. It gives you a choice of a lot of these little preset icons. So that's a SOTA Summit. So we'll put the little radio tower there. I can move it around. We can change the color. That's about all we can do. You can add a label. I think that's Charlie Mike 005. And it will put the label in a little white box, which is kind of hard to read there. You actually have a choice. I don't see a whole lot of use in it, but you can turn off the white background on the labels in the config menu. But generally speaking, it's not a bad idea to leave the white background on. It's not super pretty, but it's functional. So not much to markers. You can put them wherever you want. And we'll show, you'll see some of my maps later on where I have lots of different markers. I've imported lots of information to put on maps as markers, which is beneficial. So moving right along, this is where the good stuff is. Drawing lines. Now, you can draw simply by clicking points. And if you hold down the shift key, you can click and kind of go freehand. And so that gives you two ways to do stuff by hand. And if you noticed, you can say, oh, I didn't mean to do that. You can hit the escape key, and that's bringing up zoom for some reason. And if you can use the escape key to go back and then start over. Or you can use this little kind of return arrow to also do the same thing. You can finish a line either by double clicking or, let me just, oh, sorry. Or you can hit the checkbox over here. Now, you might have noticed that when I went to add a line, a bunch of stuff got highlighted. And those are things that Caltopo sees as possible routes. So road segments will show up, trails will show up. And so up here, we've got an option for snap to. It defaults to the open source maps, which is great because that is generally the best option for hiking trails. It's the most up to date and it has pretty good coverage. But notice over here that there's no yellow going along this little line here that's shown on the map. I know there's a trail that goes from this overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway up to Buckeye Gap where it meets the Mountains to Sea Trail. Well, you can switch to the Forest Service overlay and you can see that it follows that line all the way down to the end of the line. Unfortunately, pretty much anything that's on a Forest Service or topo map is going to show up even if it doesn't exist in real life. Let me get out of this and start over. I got to get my controls out of the way. Hang on a sec. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out kind of freehand and just guesstimate. And now when you are over one of the preset lines, you can click on that and then follow it further up and it will automatically snap to that line. Now, I know at this point I could continue on with the Forest Service, but you can always come up here even midstream and change to one of the other options. Now, you do need to kind of click somewhere close to where you are to kind of start on that new line. And then I can go all the way up over to here. And now I have a route that goes all the way from the pullout on the Parkway to the top of Mount Hardy. It actually cuts off a little bit, but you can click on a line that you've drawn. You can see the mileage estimate, which it's pretty good. Usually it's a little on the short side. I would say that this is more 2.3 miles instead of 2.2 miles, but it's pretty accurate. You can always click edit. And if I zoom in a little bit, you will see that some of the vertices are white and some are kind of transparent. So if I move one of the white vertices, it actually moves, just moves it. Now, if I move one of the intermediary ones, it'll actually create two more intermediaries. And so that can help you kind of fine tune stuff as you go along.
So Pat, this is Mark. I have a question.
Sure.
On like on SOTA Atlas or SOTA, where they have those tracks on there that I see so often, is that how those are getting populated?
No, most of those are from people that have actually hiked them and created a track with their GPS.
Okay, so that's like a KML file or something if they upload?
Correct. I mean, they're actually GPX files, more than likely. I know from SOTA Maps you can download them in either format, but I think on SOTA Atlas, if you download them, they're going to be a straight GPX file, which is what most GPS units use. And I will do that and pull them into Caltopo for route planning as well. I just like being able to have some of the features that we're going to look at in just a split second. So while we're in here in the edit mode, you can do some things. you can change the line weight. You can change, nothing is crazy here. The color, a lot of times I will alternate between a couple of the colors. You can put in, change the line style. You can put in directional errors so that you know that you're intending to hike it in that direction. But those are just a few options. So one thing I'll do even when I import a track or a line is you can pull up the profile, which is very handy. I tell you what, I'm going to change this line back, get rid of the arrows. And so this gives you the gross elevation change, gain and loss, which to me is very important. And as you can see, this particular hike is almost level until you get up to this intersection with I think that's the Haywood Gap Trail. And so one of the nice things is you can move along the profile and actually see where you are at the map. So you know that once you get to that trail intersection is where you're actually going to start climbing from there to the summit. And so most of your elevation gain, we can look, and on the left side, the cursor is at 5481, and we're going to 6107. So we know we've got, 500 plus feet of elevation gain from that point on. So that's kind of handy to know. You can also click on the expand button, which will give you some other information, which is kind of cool. It gives you these little charts down here. You can see that most of the hike is on kind of green slopes or relatively easy. The max gradient is, somewhere around 27%. Actually, I guess you get up around 30, but you can see that they are just very small sections. And so that may just literally be stepping up over a big rock or something. And most of the hike is green, which means pretty easy. And then some of this other stuff deals with land, vegetation, and tree cover. Obviously, most of our hikes here in the Southeast are in the woods. Well, we can see here that it gets pretty light around mile 1.25, somewhere in that area. And
Pat, before you go away from that,
yep,
you said at first as you go along that trail, it's fairly level, and then it starts climbing. Well, that's what the profile shows there. But the color down there in that first bar, the sort of slope intensity is green out there in where you're climbing. So what's going on there? I don't quite get that.
well, you are climbing, but it is all a fairly easy grade.
Okay.
It's not a steep climb. And so,
I see.
all most mapping things use some, see, like it's got 3.9 times vertical exaggeration. And so if there was zero exaggeration on the vertical element, it would look relatively tame. And it just makes it, I guess, a little easier to see the differences when they add that exaggeration in. I
Okay.
don't know that you can change that.
Well, I won't even try. I just want to understand uh,
Correct.
what's going on there. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So once again, it looks around mile 1.25. I'm going to guess we're coming out of the woods. So I'm going to close this up. I'm going to switch to global imagery and zoom in a little bit. And sure enough, right about mile 1.2, 1.3, you can see we're moving out into the open meadow, or the side of this open meadow there. So that information is actually pretty good most of the time. And once again, it's just nice to have. So I'm going to bounce out here a second and show you another reason it's really good to be able to stack layers. So I'm going to add another line. This happens to be one of my favorite hikes. Actually, both coming from both directions is one of my favorite hikes. So you can hike from Highway 215, and this is where the Mountains to Sea trail crosses. So, well, you know, obviously you could look at Google Maps and look at the satellite view, but once again, the stacking of the layers makes this incredibly easy to see. I can go in and kick up the imagery level, and I can see, oh yeah, there's a nice parking area right around the corner from the trail. And so that's always good to know. Of course, I still end up using Street View a lot of times to cruise up and down roads to see if you can actually find the trailheads or a decent parking spot. So now, who here can tell me what's missing from this map of Mount Hardy? Come on, I know you guys have done it.
Well, no, you've got the contour, so you have the elevation.
Right. Well, I guess specifically about the routes that are available. I know you haven't probably done this, but I know several of the guys on here have. What's the shortest route to Mount Hardy?
It's that one with all the switchbacks coming up from Mount Hardy Gap.
But does that look correct?
No, it meets another trail. You have to turn left to get to the summit.
Yeah, this is a good example of bad map information. And I think, Andy, you said you actually tried to come down that way?
I did come down that way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was really hell, I'm telling you.
So, yeah, a lot of times even the best maps will not show you all the possibilities. And so, yeah, sure enough, you can kind of start, and I think it does kind of use part of this trail, but then there is a trail that kind of loops around and then climbs up and joins up with this trail here. Now, this is a good example. So I'm kind of guesstimating this other route. And you can see that once I got up to this other line that I've drawn, that it's highlighted it. And so I can click on it and it will actually follow actually, that's not true. That's following the OpenStreetMap line. And that's not what I was going to show you. It will actually, hang on a sec. You can choose, as the snap to feature, you can choose lines, and that will actually snap to other lines that you have drawn. And a good example was I was looking at doing a trip in the Smoky Mountains and camping overnight before going to the summit. Well, I downloaded a GPX track from the SOTA Atlas that went from the trailhead to the summit, but I was going to hike beyond the summit and go to a campsite and then get up in the morning and hike to the summit. Well, I could follow the trail section, and then there is no official trail up to the summit. And so I was able to switch to the snap to line feature and then I could snap to that GPX file that I had imported, and instead of having to draw the route myself, which is probably a little bit more accurate. So those are some handy features with the snap options. Now, a few other things that we can look at in regards to lines. I don't think anybody would ever use, oh, and by the way, the terrain statistics is kind of the second, when you click expand, that's basically pulling up the terrain statistics. So that's kind of the same information. But usually I'm going, this is what I use most of the time. Now, this print map is a very quick and dirty way to print a map. It will open up a new window with the track that you have selected. Notice it doesn't have the other track that we had created. It just has the one that we had selected. It has the view settings that were in use when we were looking at the map. When we go to the actual print settings, you have way more options available. So this is just a very quick and dirty way to get a simple map, which may meet your needs exactly. So resample, probably nobody will ever use. Extend comes in handy. So I know the summit is actually right up here, not where I ended that line. So I can click there and I can create my, extend my line to where it needs to be. So say we're going to hike in this way, and instead of coming in this way, we want to use that route in reverse. We can click reverse, and now our elevation profile and information will be just the opposite of it was. So now we've got a nice two tracks of coming in from this way and hiking out to Buckeye Gap. Split I use most often when I make a mistake. Sometimes I may use it when I will draw a longer line, but it will split the track wherever you click on the line. So if I click on the line there and choose split, we will now get two separate lines from that one particular point. Obviously, join is just the opposite, but there's a gotcha. So if you want to join two lines, one of them has to be named, and because you can't choose them from the map. And so if I gave that one an actual name, I could then say I want to join that line with the line name A. And now we're back to one contiguous line. And so that, I believe, is about all I wanted to cover tonight.
Pat, one question. It's jumping the gun, but let me ask anyway. You mentioned the tracks. So if you'd already hiked Mount Hardy and you'd saved this track on your GPS and you uploaded it to the SOTA website, I can pull it down and somehow insert it into Caltopo?
Correct. Yep. And probably next week is when we'll look at import, export, and organizing information in Caltopo. And as some of you know, a bunch of us have been getting on kind of a backpacking kick recently and doing a lot of overnight trips. A lot of the summits in the Great Smokies National Park require an overnight trip, or you have to be one of those crazy trail runners or willing to do 15, 20 miles a day, which I'm not. And so I've been using Caltopo to plot out a lot of different routes, and I've added a lot of information to the map as far as where campsites are, shelters are. So we'll see a lot of the importing and the use of those features probably next week. Any other questions? Everybody awake?
Yeah, I'm very awake. I like this a lot. Thanks very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it's very handy, and like I said, some of the other features I think will be quite interesting to look at as well.
Yeah, I'm like Garrett.
Pat, I can think of several other people who would benefit from hearing this. Will you send out a link to the recording so we can share?
Yes, I will. It'll probably take me a day or two to get it up on YouTube, but I'll send out a link. I know Scott wasn't able to make it tonight, and so I know he wants to listen to it. And I hope you guys found it worthwhile and somewhat intelligible.
It was well done.
You've given me more reasons to be obsessed over something now.
Oh,
this looks like I could spend hours in here.
Oh, I spent countless hours when I'm supposed to be doing stuff like working and and chores and things like that. No, yeah, go right ahead.
When you're doing the drawing, are you going to go into it in later detail, drawing several different routes to go up and several routes to come down?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of did that here, and that's one reason I chose Mount Hardy is, once again, I encourage anybody to do any of these routes, and so because they're all great hikes, and so like the hike from 215 is probably the longest. But you get a view of a really nice waterfall right in through here. It's just a really nice hike. This is that kind of atypical spruce fir forest that we have at the really high elevations in the southeast. Very unusual for typical southern forest. So all three of these hikes are amazing hikes. Obviously, a lot of people, want to
Pat,
go
if
the
I
short
were
way.
doing Mount Hardy and I was doing that approach with all the switchbacks, would I be able to get a point on the parkway an exact point where if I park my car, I know where that trailhead is?
More or less. And I'm pretty sure it's in the access notes that there is like a paved drainage ditch, and if you park immediately after that is where you go into the woods. And to be honest, you don't really hit these switchbacks at all. I mean, you may get into the woods about somewhere in this area, and then the trail starts to contour around the mountain. And so I know a number of people have had difficulty navigating. Let's see if we can even see it. Let's stack the imagery on there again. So you can see that there is kind of a band of cliffs right there, and it doesn't really show up so much, but you kind of go through a somewhat open area, and then it really does kind of turn into a little bit of a goat path. I mean, the trail is good up until right about the end of the cliff face, and then it kind of scurries up to the actual trail up to the summit. So, but if you've got the track on your GPS, you should be pretty good to go. And this is the way I remember it. When you come down, you make a hard right, and then you kind of make a hard left. And in the trail, I guess I got lucky. The trail actually comes in right there, and it's not easy to see. It's not obviously an official trail, and so you kind of have to be on your toes.
I'm interested, like Derek, in how to use these GPS tracks. If I download one, I don't know what software to use with it when I'm in the field. That's,
Well, you have, and so are you going to be using an actual GPS unit, or are you going to be using an app on your phone?
that's the question. I don't know. I don't know how
Well,
to do this.
okay, and we will talk about using the app. Either I don't know roughly when we'll get to that,
Okay.
but it makes it basically I save this map, and then I can just pull it straight up on my phone.
Okay.
It's very simple to do it that way, and that's what I was using when we were on Hyatt and Breakneck Ridge a couple weeks ago.
Okay. I'd look forward to that. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Pat.
You were welcome. I'm glad to share this with you.
Yeah. Here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time you put into this, and this is really good.
Great.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Glad to hear that.
It was great, Pat. We're going to be gone next Wednesday, so I will have to catch it on tape next week. So.
Okay, not a problem. We will be recording that as well.
Nice to see all you guys face to face.
Good night, guys.
See ya.
Good night.
All right, everybody.
Thank you so